Welcome back to another episode of Huddle Up, the show where we talk all things football. I'm Thomas Pocrnic, joined by Luca Celebre as always. Luca, we are absolutely in full swing football season right now. How's it going?
It's going amazing, and this is the best time of the year, but not the best time for all fan bases because some fan bases, like myself, Denver Broncos fans, sadly, we're 0-2.
Yeah, and it's not the place you want to be in to start the NFL season. We know the numbers behind it. Starting 0-2 drastically decreases your chances of going to the playoffs. In fact, since the NFL updated the playoff format, only the Cincinnati Bengals have been to the playoffs after an 0-2 start, and they did that last year. And I guess they felt like that was a good strategy because they're once again 0-2 to start this year. Might have a different feeling behind it this time, but they're not the only team that's 0-2, and that's what we're going to do today. We are going to look at which of the 0-2 teams we are feeling most confident about to sort of turn their fortunes around and make it to the NFL playoffs.
The funny thing is the word confident cannot be used to describe the team I'm going with in the Los Angeles Chargers because I don't think anyone is confident in anything this franchise does ever, whether it's injuries, which always seem to happen to the Chargers, whether it's coaching decisions that cost them games, close games, they never seem to win them, but I'm somehow confident in this team. And I think the reason why I'm confident is I love what I'm seeing out of the offense in Justin Herbert and Kellen Moore. His first year as the offensive coordinator there. Last week, week one against the Dolphins, you saw a completely different approach. That running game was so strong, and it's something that last season they didn't have to be able to rely on, quite frankly. And then game two against the Tennessee Titans. Justin Herbert has another really great game, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and they still find a way to lose. I'm not confident that they can win these close games, and that definitely scares me. They've got another matchup with an 0-2 team coming up in the Minnesota Vikings this weekend to try and get their first win. And of all these teams we're talking about, like, Brandon Staley's seat has got to be the hottest of any NFL coach, especially if they are to lose this next game.
The way they are losing is mind-boggling, especially if you go back to last season, how their season ended going up 27-0 on the Jaguars. This week, you got the Titans. You think they can be there for the taking, but yeah, not a great start for the Chargers. But I understand where the confidence comes from because when you have a player like Justin Herbert who continues to week in and week out, regardless of the environment that he's in, looks to be playing at a very high level, you're going to be confident because when you have a player like that, most games you are going to go in with the better quarterback, and we all know how important that is for these teams. So I like the pick from you with the Chargers.
Yeah, and what I've seen from Herbert too in this offense, I think a lot of the questions coming in with Kellen Moore were could he improve the running game and would they take more shots down the field? And I'm pretty sure his average depth of target last game against the Titans was 11 yards. So you're passing for a first down every time when you're targeting players like that. That is pushing the ball. That is the definition of it. I think when you're talking about this team too, the only 0-2 team in NFL history to have 50 points scored in 2 games, no turnovers, and 0-2 somehow. And also, they're a top 3 unit offensively efficiency-wise. So, this is another notch against Brandon Staley, who's supposed to be this defensive-minded head coach. And the defense is the thing that's letting them down now. It's let them down in the past. It's the area of the team they've invested the most in, whether it's the Khalil Mack trade or J.C. Jackson, that high-priced contract. You've got Derwin James. You've got Joey Bosa. You have more pieces on defense than you do offense. So to be this bad defensively, it's either he's going to get fired or they turn it around, and when that marriage kind of comes together, they're going to be a lot better results.
And I think they could, just as easily as they're 0-2, I think they could be 2-0. They lose a game in overtime. The Dolphins game went down to the last possession a week ago. So there are some reasons to be positive, but obviously a very frustrating scenario. And like you said, that seat on Brandon Staley is warming up by the minute. I'm going to stick in the AFC with my team, and it may be the easy choice because they have been to a Super Bowl, they have been to AFC championship games in the past couple of years, but the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, they started 0-2 last year, and everyone's pointing towards that and how they turned it around. And some positives to take away were last year in that 0-2 start, Joe Burrow was getting sacked like crazy, and this year it's been a little bit different. Obviously, Joe Burrow missed all of training camp with that calf injury, and that's going to be tough. You see the rust. It took him a while to get going, especially in that first game, connecting with his receivers. But it's kind of the defense that's concerning me a little bit more with the Cincinnati Bengals. No team has allowed more yards on the ground than the Bengals so far this season, and they only have 3 sacks. So they're clearly not making it difficult for the opposing team's offense. They're not getting them off the field. And when you're losing these battles of time possession and losing the battle of field positioning, it's going to be very hard to dictate the game and to score points at a pretty efficient rate. Couple that with the fact that you have a sloppy start with a rusty quarterback, and there you go. You lose 2 close games, and you're sitting at 0-2.
And 2 divisional opponents.
Divisional opponents, which was massive. Now, here's where I can get a little positive. Like, this is a team that can get hot. So that is sort of where I'm coming around. They have so much talent. We saw T. Higgins get going. Jamar Chase hasn't got going yet. I think Joe Burrow's going to improve. He's going to show everyone why they paid him that money. He's a December quarterback. He's a January quarterback. I think we'll look back on these early September games and say, like, wow, that feels like a long time ago when this offense is rolling and this team is picking up W's. So I would not push the panic button right now on the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think if there's a team to turn around this 0-2 start, it is them.
I agree with that too. And I know the defense, you talk about them too. Little younger, they lose kind of that veteran experience on the back end and Von Bell and Jesse Bates, 2 really big losses. And so you've got some youth back there, some inexperience back there that you're looking at, and Dax Hill specifically, their first round pick from a couple years ago. So there are question marks, but it's not like we haven't seen this team do it before. The proof of concept is there that they can kind of start off slow and they can pick right back up where they left off because they're so talented everywhere. So I like that pick. Let's talk about a couple teams that we didn't choose in this exercise because there are a lot of 0-2 teams that we could talk about as maybe having some faith in. Probably the Minnesota Vikings are one of them, but I think we just don't believe in their defense, right?
Yeah, they're, again, a very, very intriguing one because if you look at that Eagles game, and this is the NFC champion, very, very close to being the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles we're talking about, if Justin Jefferson doesn't have that rare hiccup where he fumbles out of bounds in the end zone for a touchback, they could have easily won that game and turned it around. The way they played catch-up and the way Kirk Cousins commanded that offense against a very, very tough Eagles defense was very, very impressive. Mm-hmm. Like, the way the offense played, it's hard for me to think that they're not going to be in games down the stretch. The defense, though, I don't know whether it's scheme, whether it's personnel, but what they're doing right now, just it's not working. Yes, they play in a more favorable division and a more favorable conference, but they just need to put it a little bit more altogether because right now Kirk is just carrying way too much of a load on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm. And we know with Kirk Cousins too, especially, like he's a really good quarterback. I feel like he doesn't get the respect he deserves. And even after that loss to the Eagles, the primetime stat gets thrown around where his record in primetime games is obviously not good, but you're going to blame that loss on him. Yeah. They're the only reason they're in that game. So if Kirk Cousins, though, is shouldering everything, I don't think that's a place you want to be too often because he isn't that guy that's going to kind of be able to shoulder the load every game, and every game you're down, you feel like you can come back because you have him. Not saying that won't happen a lot of the time because I think with those weapons, he is really good and you can count on him. But with how bad the defense is playing and just we've seen Kirk Cousins in enough big moments as well to know that he's not one of the 5 best quarterbacks in football. He might not be one of the 8 best quarterbacks. That's fine. You can still win with that. But how often can you win with that when he is mainly the driving force? I don't know. In these close games, last year they were swinging in the right way for them. This year they're already 0-2 in these one-score games. So you can see kind of that regression coming back. Another 0-2 team I want to talk about is the Houston Texans and I don't think there's any reason for me to toss playoffs out. It's more just I love the plan, and I love what I'm seeing from them. And DeMeco Ryans' his first year. C.J. Stroud looks like a great pick at quarterback. Will Anderson Jr. looks like a great trade-up, even if, and you know what, it remains to be seen because that Cardinals pick is going to be a really good pick by the time the season's all said and done if they can't win some games. But it seems like it's worth it because he is a difference maker on defense. I think they'll probably be feistier than people are giving them credit for. Probably not making the playoffs or making any noise there, but I've just been impressed with them through 2 games.
I think this is going to be a great learning season, what I'll call it, for the Houston Texans, where you got a guy like C.J. Stroud. Some people were a little bit weary. Is he pro ready to play in the NFL coming out of college? Ohio State quarterbacks haven't necessarily translated the best in the pros as of late. He's come in here. He threw for nearly 400 yards in week 2, and he doesn't have a lot around him. This is an offensive line that's missing 3 starters, and he seems to be sort of navigating his way. Now, you can't do this forever, right? At some point, you need to see some results, and you hope that the roster improves. But for the first couple weeks, for a rookie to come in and put up the numbers that he's put up and look somewhat comfortable out there and competent, not be prone to stupid turnovers and mistakes, you have to be happy if you're a Houston Texans fan for sure.
And realistically, like, there are fans of the Chicago Bears looking at the Houston Texans already and are like, our quarterback hasn't thrown for 300 yards yet in the NFL.
Yeah.
Houston Texans' new quarterback in his second game just did it for the first time in his career. And so you look at those two situations where the results matter for another 0-2 team, the Chicago Bears. The results for the Texans don't matter this year. Eventually, like you said, they need to have wins, but this season is all about just knowing if Stroud can take those steps to become that guy that you use that high pick on. The Bears are already giving up on Justin Fields. Their fans, if you talk to them, they're already way out on Justin Fields through 2 games, and part of that is his fault, part of that's the coaching, whatever the case may be. But just knowing how quickly the NFL cycle operates in the sense that you don't have a lot of time to prove that you're the guy or not before these teams kind of move on. So to see it from the Texans so early already, and hopefully it continues, is a good sign if you're a Houston fan.
I talked about CJ Stroud being in his learning years. Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears are now what I'll call the earning years, where you need to prove that you can be a legitimate star quarterback in this league and propel a franchise forward that has not had a lot of success, especially on the offensive side of the ball, in what feels like decades. And they're just not doing that right now. And you can point the blame at whoever you want. Maybe he's not in the right situation. Maybe the scheme and the coaching isn't right for him. But they did invest in the offensive line, and they did invest in an upgrade at his weapons group this offseason, and it's just not working. And as bad as it is to say, I fear that at the end of the day, Justin Fields is going to be the one that ends up taking the fall and taking the blame for this. That's just the nature and the pressure on quarterbacks in this league. Very unfortunate. But yeah, 2 very different feelings, I think, when you talk about Houston and you talk about Chicago for 0-2 teams. And then you got teams that, you know, we felt we're going to be contending for the Super Bowl, like the Chargers and the Bengals in the mix over there. So that's why we play the games, because you never really know what to expect in the NFL, and it's been a pretty great start to the season so far.